Hey you guys, welcome back to Breaking the Cycle. My name is Tracy and I am a licensed therapist in long-term recovery. And Breaking the Cycle is where I share my recovery experiences and tips to help you build a happy and successful life after addiction. So today's video is part 3 of my story, Addict to Therapist. The parts 1 and 2 I released a long time ago. I kind of took a break from YouTube for a while, kind of focusing on my own career and my therapy practice. And now I am back with part 3. So in part 1 of my story, I shared kind of how I got into my addiction and then a little bit of the during in my addiction. And so part 3 is going to be when I am fresh out of prison and kind of going over some of those challenges that I faced in early recovery and fresh out of prison and how I dealt with those. But let me take just a minute to tell you why I feel like this is important for you to hear. If you've been around for a minute on this channel, then you know that I am in recovery. I struggled with addiction for over 10 years, IV heroin addiction for over 5 years, and I got clean at the very end of 2013. The day before Christmas Eve, 2013 was the last time that I ever used H. Now, let me be clear that that was not the only time that I had been clean. I had been clean many times before throughout my addiction, but this was the first time that I stayed clean. And I still have not touched H to this day, 10 years later. So what made this time different than the rest of them? Why was I able to stay clean this time, but not all of those other times? So that's what I'm going to be sharing with you today, is what I did to do that, what I did fresh out of prison in order to maintain my recovery and overcome the many obstacles that come with A, early recovery, and B, getting out of prison. Because that's the problem, right? I mean, that's what keeps people in addiction. That's what keeps people relapsing. It's those obstacles in early recovery. So I want to share my story, A, so that you know that it's possible for you as well, and B, because maybe there's some tidbits that you can find in there that you can apply to your own life that can help you achieve this as well. Real quick before we get started, just a quick thank you to everybody who is here, everybody who is so supportive to me on here. I really appreciate you. You know that it is my dream to be able to do this full time and start support groups and an app and programs and all kinds of things. Every little bit of support is noticed. It's very noticed. If you want to check me out on any other platforms, I do have Instagram and Facebook, and I do use my Instagram as sort of a challenge. I post daily journal prompts in the stories and action steps in the post. So my Instagram is basically a very quick way that you can check in the morning and take a few minutes a day for your mental health. And you can find those linked in the description box down below. Okay, so we are going back in time here. We are going back in time to 2013. We're going back in time to 2014 because I already told you that story. We're going back in time to June 2014. So back in the summer of 2014, I was incarcerated at IWP, Indiana Women's Prison, and June 24th was my release date. Now, unfortunately, I had a pending charge, so I did not get to go home on my release date. My original county that I came from, they came and picked me up, and I got to go back to county jail and stay there for a few days awaiting my next court date. But at my next court date, the judge basically said, okay, you've served your time in prison, now complete a treatment program and we'll call it even. Those were not his exact words, but basically, completing a treatment program was my sentence for this second charge that I had pending. So I was sent back to the jail until we could find a treatment program or a halfway house for me to go into. So you best believe we started hunting. My dad helped me hunt, and it was about 2 days later that I called the owner of this halfway house, about an hour and a half away from my hometown. I will never forget this woman. I will never forget her because well, you'll see why. So I call this woman on the phone and she asks me, she says, "Are you incarcerated right now?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Get your stuff and come home." And I was just like, thank you. I think it instantly made me cry when she said that, because I was like, this woman cares. She literally just got me out of jail right now. Otherwise, I would have had to sit in there for God knows how long until I found a different program. But because of her, I was immediately released into my dad's custody, and we went and got my stuff together, and I went straight to that facility. So after all that, after all my time in prison, after my time in county jail, and then in prison, and then back in county jail, I was finally free, somewhat free. I was in this halfway house. I was immediately put into a bedroom in this small little house with 2 other girls. I was given a top bunk, and I did not even care. I was so happy to be out. I was just so happy and so grateful that she said, "Come on." Now, I say facility, but this was not a facility. This was a woman who bought houses on her own accord. This was literally just a house on the block that I moved into, and it was me and I think 4 or 5 other girls in there. And she did not live at the house. We actually had no supervision at the house, but we did have people who came and took us to like AA meetings twice a day. And other stuff. You know, we were supposed to be looking for jobs. We were supposed to be in therapy. Sometimes people from the Indiana University would come and kind of do activities with us. So we were still supervised, just not 24/7. So I moved into this house with a backpack full of clothes, and that's about it. See, before I got locked up, I lived with my mom. And while I was in prison, my mom actually moved to Florida. All of my stuff got packed away into my dad's garage, and I didn't have time to go through any of it before I went to this halfway house. So I really just came in with a bag full of clothes, and that was it. I didn't have a car, I didn't have any money, I didn't have a job, I didn't have a phone, I didn't have anything. And this lady, the owner of this halfway house, she just said, "Come on." She didn't care if I could pay or not. We were supposed to pay, but she didn't care if I could pay or not. We were supposed to immediately sign up for food stamps so that we could contribute to the food in the house, but I could not get food stamps because at this point in time in Indiana, you could not get food stamps if you had a drug charge on your record. So because I had a possession on my record, I was not allowed to get food stamps. So I couldn't pay for the house. I couldn't contribute any food to the house. I came in with nothing, and still she took me anyway. So that just tells you how big of a heart this woman had. It's beautiful to me. It still just, it gets me when I think about it, because that just was, you know, I probably wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for her, honestly. So she let me stay there. She fed me. The girls in there, they cooked for me. They took care of me, and I kind of got back up on my feet. They had all been there a little bit longer than I had. They helped me out with phones and things like that, and it was really a pretty good environment. There were some really good girls in the house, and I bonded with them, and it was going good. I didn't know any of the girls in that house. I didn't know anybody in that neighborhood. Like I said, I was like an hour or 2 from home. So it was not going to be easy for me to, you know, find a ride or just pop off around the corner and go get something. You know what I mean? So I just really wasn't focused on that at all. I didn't know for sure if I was going to stay clean for the rest of my life or not. I was just in the moment right now, and right now I'm okay, and I really would rather not go back to prison. So I'm going to try to keep doing okay. Now, after you had been at this house for a while, you started to get like day passes where you could go out for a couple hours at a time, and then you could even go out overnight. Okay, keep in mind at this time I am 24 years old. I had just turned 24. I turned 24 in prison. I was still young. I was still wild. I still did not have any kids. And I ended up kind of speaking back with one of my exes while I was in that house. It was a man that I had actually left while I was in prison because I think that we wanted different things in life, right? So I ended up kind of using my free time to go and hang out with this man. Well, it didn't take long after that for me to get pregnant. I know, it's a very, very classy conception story, right? And I can tell you my family definitely thought the same thing. This was my first time ever being pregnant, and my family basically was scared to death. My family was like, oh Lord, you know, this girl has been in addiction for the past 10 years. She just got out of prison. She's living in a halfway house. Like, we're gonna have to take this baby. My family was literally talking like, okay, who's gonna take this baby? They were literally like planning on that. They did not think that I was gonna make it. And as for me, when I found out, this kind of sounds bad, but you know, like, having kids was not something that I ever particularly wanted until it happened. Of course, I wouldn't change anything at all ever now, but when it first happened, I definitely didn't feel great about it. It made me feel a little bit sick. I kind of felt like, oh my God, you know, this was one of those things that is for life. Like, that was kind of always how I looked at situations. Like, there's very few things in life that actually impact you for life. And if it's not something that impacts me for the rest of my life, then I didn't really care about it, right? But this was something that did impact me for life. And so this scared me. This was something that scared me. Now, I am grateful every single day that I had already had a decent amount of clean time under my belt when this happened. Because I can only imagine that if I didn't, I would be in a totally different situation than I am in today. But because I had just been incarcerated for so long, and I had been in the halfway house for a couple months at this point, so I had about a year clean at this point. And that was a huge blessing that I didn't have that weight on my shoulders at that time. Okay, so I find out that I'm pregnant. 24 years old. I'm still living in this halfway house. Boyfriend, baby daddy, he is living at his buddy's house back in my home area. We're not technically together. So I go back to this halfway house, and I keep doing my thing every day. I'm going to my meetings, and I got a lot of time in there. You know, I've got a lot of time to just think. And I kind of isolated a little bit when I found this out. I kind of stopped hanging out with the other girls and stuff like that, and I just kind of hung out by myself and just kind of thought about things. And it was at that point in time that my mind and my thought processes just kind of started to change a little bit. They kind of started to shift. Before I found out that I was pregnant, I was a smoker. Now I'm going out to smoke, and I'm thinking, wait a minute. And I'm literally thinking about this smoke going down through my body into my little baby fetus, and I'm like, I can't do it. I stopped smoking. And then I started thinking about, and I thought about what I'm eating going down through my body to that little baby fetus. And I was like, oh my God, I have to eat better. And then I started thinking, what am I going to do when I get home? I have 2 felonies on my record. How am I going to support this baby? What am I going to do? Be a waitress? That's not going to cut it. I got to enroll in school, right? So I'm like up in my room at this halfway house, like frantically searching for schools and making plans and like trying to make things happen, because I'm scared now. I'm scared. For once, I am thinking about the future, and I am thinking about this baby, and I am thinking about, it's not just me anymore. You know, I started thinking about my childhood, and I had really great parents growing up. My parents were always there for me. I never questioned their love for me. I always had everything that I needed. We weren't like rich or anything, but we were good, you know. And I thought about this child growing up without that, and it didn't sit right with me. It just didn't sit right with me. And so I realized, like, I'm gonna have to show up for this child. Like, nobody else is gonna do it. My mind started changing, and the things that I used to do suddenly weren't worth the risk anymore. I started thinking about my actions before I took them, and I started thinking of ways that I could create a stable life for us. And for the first time in my life, my actions mattered. They affected somebody more than just me, and it had always been just me. So that was a big change for me. So I did actually enroll in school. I enrolled at my local community college before I even left that halfway house. I wasn't fully enrolled. Like, I don't know if you've ever enrolled in college, but I had to go take tests to get in and placement tests to see where I was at and what classes that I needed to take, and I didn't have a car and I didn't have a license, and I had to take public transportation all the way 2 hours away to take these placement tests. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. So first of all, you know, my time at the halfway house comes to an end at about 4 months in. I go to my court date and they tell me, okay, you have successfully completed this program, you can go home now. Now, luckily, I have a sister that is very good to me and that let me stay with her for free and helped me get back on my feet. She didn't let me just sit there at home by myself to stew and wonder and think on things. She didn't leave me to my own devices. She was like, if you're gonna come and stay with me, you're gonna do it my way. You're gonna come to work with me, you're gonna work until you get a job. And I was like, okay, all right, let's do it. So I went to work with her every day. She owned a grooming and a boarding business. So I came and I helped with the dogs and I picked up dog poop and I did my work. I started applying at jobs right away when I got back. And that was a very difficult process. Y'all know I have a couple other videos on that process, but getting a job was very difficult with 2 felonies on my record. I had a lot of denials. I had a lot of applications turned in with no callbacks. And I had a lot of really embarrassing job interviews. Really horrendous job interviews. And I think I told you in that other video, like at first I tried to hide it. At first I tried to like not check the have you been convicted box. I tried to ignore it. I tried to be like, no, you're not gonna find anything on my background check. And then of course they did, and then it didn't work out for me, right? So finally I go to this interview for this serving job and I decide, all right, I'm just gonna be honest. I'm just gonna tell them straight up, I just got out of prison, I'm a felon, this is what's up. And if they don't take me, then they don't take me. So I did. I remember being so nervous before that interview. My gut was just churning. And I went to this interview and I told them, she said, you know, we have to do a background check. And I said, well, you know, about that, there is some things that are going to come up on the background check. And I explained it to her. And I remember at the end of that interview, she said, you know what? She said, I like you. She said, I would like to hire you. And I just remember thinking like, really? Really? So finally I was honest, and that's when I finally was able to get a job. So I got this job serving. I was a waitress at a truck stop. I couldn't do the cash register. I couldn't cash people out or anything like that because I had a burglary on my record. But I got employed as a server, and I was so grateful to have that job. I was so grateful. I was working second shift, and I worked there for about 2 years. All throughout my pregnancy, I worked there. And while I was doing that, I had also gotten into my community college. I went and I took all the tests that I needed to take, and I found out how to get financial aid, and I signed up for all that crap. It is a process, let me tell you, it is a process. So I was working full-time, second shift waitress. I was going to school also full-time because I was in a hurry, right? I was like, I'm not trying to be a waitress forever. So immediately from the rip, I start going full-time, 4 classes a semester. So I'm working full-time, I'm going to school full-time, I'm staying with my sister, and I'm pregnant. And I am really just keeping to myself at this time. I'm not really talking to any of my old friends. I'm just kind of working, and I'm going to school when I'm done with work, and I'm hanging out with my sister when I'm not doing that, and I'm thinking about this baby, and I'm nesting. I just really didn't fuck with anybody at that point in time. That includes baby daddy. Like I said, we wanted different things in life, and I noticed that he was on a very different path than I was. And I made a promise to my baby long before I ever had him. And I promised him that he would never know that side of me. He would never know that life. So I decided that I was going to raise him on my own. You know, sometimes people would pop up in Facebook Messenger or things like that, but I was very grateful that I didn't have my own place, because I could never be like, yeah, hey, stop by, let's catch up. You know what I mean? Because my sister wouldn't have been cool with that. This was a family home that I was staying in, so I couldn't have just random people stopping over. So that really worked in my favor. And also at this point, I'm like 1.5 years clean. It also really worked in my favor, having that time in the halfway house so that I was able to get my head on straight before I came back home was such a huge help. I really honestly believe that if I had left prison and came right back home, I would be right back in that situation. I would probably still be in and out of jail today. Maybe I'd be dead. I don't know. But I wouldn't be here. I can guarantee you I would not be here. So the halfway house helped me so much. Getting involved right away helped me so much. Getting involved in my job and in school and having something to do, having something to fill my time, having something to work toward. And then every time I passed a class, it felt good. Every time I passed a class, I checked it off my list and I was one step closer to that degree, and that felt good. And I got kind of addicted to that, you know what I mean? And I was like, okay, I want more. Give me more. So I kept checking off my classes and I kept checking off my certification programs. I was signing up for online classes and random certifications and things like that. I was very much staying busy and moving forward and getting addicted to my achievements at this point. I was trying to exercise. I was trying to be healthy because for the first time, like I said, my actions mattered. I realized I needed to live a long time now. I never really cared about that before, but all of a sudden it matters to me how old I am when I pass. So I need to try and be healthy. I need to try and make up for all of the damage that I did to my body over the years. So I'm trying to learn how to eat healthy. I'm trying to learn how to cook. I'm trying to do all of these things. So I very much went from addict, inmate, to adult, working, grown-up overnight. It was good. It was good for me. That's what I needed. I needed something to hold me accountable. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying everybody who gets out of prison needs to go get pregnant right now, because that will keep you clean. That is not what I'm saying. Please don't get me wrong on that. What I'm saying is I found a purpose for myself. I found a purpose that was greater than myself to get me motivated. What I'm saying is that I gave myself a decent amount of clean time before I came back home to my hometown. What I'm saying is that when I did come back to my hometown, I stayed to myself and I didn't go hang out with all my old friends, and I got involved in new stuff. I stayed very busy, every minute of every day kind of busy. When I wasn't busy, I was by myself. And you know what? That was okay. I still had support. I still had my family and things like that. I think I was still going to meetings and whatnot because I was on probation at the time. I wasn't like isolating myself, but I wasn't hanging around with any of my old friends. I wasn't doing any of that stuff that I used to do. So surrounding yourself with new people. And you know, after I worked at that job for a little while, I remember I saved up $800 and I bought my first car. Well, not my first car, but my first car since I was out of prison. And it was a 98 Toyota Camry, and it could not shift above third gear because I don't know why. It was an automatic, but it just couldn't. It couldn't go above third gear. So once you got going about 40 miles an hour on the road, it would like the engine was gonna blow. So you had to either slow down and drive 30, or I would have to stop and pull over on the side of the road and wait for a while, and then kind of drive slowly, and then it would shift over. I'll have to see if I can find a picture to pop up, because yeah, big difference. Let me see if I can find a picture of that car that I got then and the car I have now 10 years later. After the baby came, it was hard to make money there anymore. There's no money on first shift at a truck stop. None. Keep in mind, I've still got these felonies on my records. I don't have a degree yet, so pretty much my only job options are serving and factory work around here. So I took a job at a factory and I signed a lease pretty much in the same week. And I got my own place for the first time, me and my baby boy. I think he was maybe 6 months old at the time, maybe a year. I don't really remember. But I got my own place and I remember being so proud. I loved buying things for that place, but I didn't have a lot of money at the time. I was still doing the same thing. I was still working full-time at the factory, going to school full-time, and taking care of my baby. And then shortly after that, I was able to get a better car, one that did shift into fourth gear. And then I lost my job. And here I was in my own place for the first time, me and my baby, and I don't have a job anymore. I did not know how I was gonna feed my child. I did not know how I was gonna pay my bills. I was getting credit cards and running them up just to get by. I still couldn't get food stamps at this time because of that law in Indiana, no drug charges. So it was rough. It was a really rough time. And I just felt like, man, you know, I've been clean for like, what, 1 or 2 years at this point? Like, why am I not further than this? How am I still not able to pay the bills? How am I still not able to find a job? And I just remember feeling so hopeless. I had all of these demands. I had the demands of being a mother, the demands of having my own place. I had the demands of probation, get here every week, do your check-in, go to all these meetings, but your car doesn't work half the time and you don't have money for gas. And I just remember feeling really, really hopeless. I just remember thinking, like, it doesn't matter how hard I work, I'm never gonna make it. And I remember at this point in time, I applied for a job everywhere. I'm talking McDonald's, I'm talking janitor jobs, I'm talking places an hour away, everywhere. And I was not getting any callbacks. I was going to interviews and not getting hired. I remember I interviewed at a Chipotle, the Mexican Grill, the like fast food restaurant. It was like 40 minutes away from me too, not even in my town. And I had an interview and I thought that it went pretty well. And then I got an email saying we have moved forward with another candidate. And I remember just feeling absolutely crushed and completely hopeless. Like, I cannot even get a job at Chipotle. Like, how am I gonna do this? How am I ever gonna get past this apartment and this car that doesn't run? How am I ever gonna give my son a good life? Like, I'm just not gonna be able to do this as long as I have this felony hanging off of my back. And then it was at that point in time, after I didn't get that job at Chipotle, that I ended up applying at a local mental health center. That's what I was going to school for, was psychology, mental health. And I remember applying to the job and thinking, there's no way that they're gonna hire me. I know that they don't hire felons, but whatever, I'll just apply anyway. But I knew good and well that I was not getting a call back from them. But lo and behold, a couple weeks later, I got a call from them. And I went in and I interviewed and I was honest and I told them about my background, and that ended up being my first job in the mental health field. It was not long after that that I got promoted to a case manager. And with that came a raise, and with that came Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 hours, which is something that I had been dreaming of for a long time as a working single mother. And then shortly after that, I was actually sought out by our local hospital who was starting an addictions program. They had heard about me and they thought that I might be a good fit for a recovery coach. So I ended up leaving the mental health center to go there, and that introduced me to all kinds of opportunities. I got to be involved in the inner workings of the hospital and the creation of this program. I got to be involved with doctors and judges and CEOs and sit alongside in those meetings. And so that position brought me so many opportunities, and I'm so grateful for my manager too in that position, because she really pushed me out of my comfort zone. I got to do a lot of public speaking events on recovery coaching and the benefits of it and things like that. And from there, you know, I was able to continue to grow my career. And then I finally graduated with my bachelor's degree, and I was able to get more of a raise, and I was able to get a better car. And then I kept going to school and I got my master's degree, and then I was able to get a job that paid even more. And then I was able to get a house, and then I was able to get a better car. You know, that house wasn't what I wanted. It was in a neighborhood that was far away from mine, and I was only approved for $75,000, so it was a little fixer-upper, but we fixer-uppered, and I sold it. And then I was able to get a better house in the town that I did want to live in. Slowly but surely, I began climbing that ladder. My finances got better, and my home got better, and my car got better, and my jobs got better, until we're where I'm at today. Today, I'm 10 years clean. I live in a home that I own, the second home that I've purchased. I have a real nice SUV that I drive. It's got a third row for my kids. I got 3 kids now. I'm a licensed therapist. I get to do this, and I'm not rich by any means, but I'm comfortable. We get to go on vacations, and I am providing a stable life for all 3 of my children by myself. Even though there are times when it felt utterly impossible, and even though there were times where it felt like I was working my ass off and not getting anywhere, I was. And looking back now, it doesn't even seem like all that long ago. It doesn't seem like that long ago that I was a waitress in a truck stop. But I can tell you that those are the things that make me feel extremely grateful for the life that I do have every single day when I wake up. It is very much possible to climb your way out of this mess. It is very much possible to succeed even with a felony hanging off of your back. It is very much possible to create a life for yourself that you love. It's possible to create a self that you love. Because that's the problem, isn't it? We're often not happy with ourselves. We don't think that it's possible for us to have a good life, or we don't think that we deserve to have a good life. Regardless of what's on your background, you do deserve to have a good life. You do deserve that, and you can have that. It's all about your actions. It's all about the steps that you decide to take today, because that is where you're going to be tomorrow. Your choices that you make today is where you're going to be tomorrow. Every single little one. Are you going to sleep in today, or are you going to get up and exercise and lose weight? Are you going to apply to that job that you don't think is going to hire you, or are you going to stick with working at Chipotle? It's all up to you. I know that it's very hard to keep going sometimes when you feel like you're working and not getting anywhere. So if you are in that place, I want you to just take a minute today. Just take a minute and step back and look at the whole picture, and look at where you were 2 years ago. Look at where you were 5 years ago. Identify a couple ways that you have made progress in the last 5 years, and I guarantee you, you will come up with something. It might be slow sometimes, but you will get there if you put in the effort. 100%, if you put in the effort. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, I do have a link to mental health resources down below this video. I thank you guys for watching. I hope this was helpful for someone, and I will see you in my next one.